interesting. I mean, I used to be, I used to do a lot of programming when I was in my teen years. Basically, all sorts of things. And before I actually went to law school, and even like in the first year or so, a couple of years actually, I did try a couple of other startups. Well, I never kind of like projected anything to last longer than I would want it to. So I basically had a couple of fintech startups where it was focused more on credit, but more on basically one was focused upon like advancing the payments of, let's say, different kinds of games, app store revenue, and so forth. And that was basically a 1 year trial. And another one is it was more about creating this kind of like I would say like guarantors, like splitting the bank loan guarantors from one person to multiple person, and kind of like monetizing that. Just more of an experiment. And but end of the day, I went into law. I really loved rules, and kind of like legal field is something that's very intact into in any kind of business, and there's so much opportunities there depending on what you want to do. And kind of like as a balance between code and law is that like in code you have like mathematics and exacts outcomes from inputs. Law is kind of different because inputs and outputs might vary, and it's very opinionated. So it was kind of very nice balance there. And I think it was second or third year. I think it was second year. It was in 2016 when I started to get more introduced into the blockchain communities, and especially in Ethereum. And I found kind of the idea of smart contracts, especially the property of immutable code, very interesting, and kind of figured that there might be very interesting use cases in the legal industry, but also being kind of like a finance geek, ended up trying to apply it to finance. And what happened is actually we made a small proof of concept, which basically got a lot of attention and escalated into a community, and then escalated into a startup, and then escalated into a fundraising. And everything happened so quickly that I couldn't even basically, it basically stalled my kind of studies in the university and in Helsinki. And we then opened our first office in Switzerland, and then second one in London, Shoreditch, and basically moved our headquarters there. And now we launched our latest protocol in January, and I think we have now market size of 180 million in value. So that's basically a locked value in our money markets and borrowed value altogether. So it has been pretty funny journey in that sense that I didn't expect this to happen, but I'm glad it did.
Yeah, and so I want to go back to 2017. So you said it all happened so fast. Again, how did it come to pass that you did an ICO? And what was it like when 16 million kind of, well, I'm sure it was in ether, so it's kind of take it with a pinch of salt. But what was it like going through this whole process?
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. I mean, I was back then still living in kind of like our my student apartment, and I was still, I mean, doing all the work from there. Quite long days though. I mean, I think I worked from morning to evening, just basically make kind of like I noticed that there was like a time period that everything was so focused upon us, like what we were doing. So I just wanted to make most out of it and put everything else on the side, which is not healthy always. But I guess I kind of knew that there was a short period of time I have to do that.
Yeah.
But end of the day, like it just continued and continued. So that's one of the things in startups and in general, like if you are going to do something, like you need to have a good balance and remember that there's always tomorrow. But there's also deals that you have to do right away, and you just need to do them. But it's not easy, and first years is always like this. But it felt very good after we raised the funds and we kind of understood that people trust us. So that was like very spectacular moment.
Yeah. Were you worried at all when that much money popped in? Were you thinking, shit, like what's the regulatory implications? Like, can I trust myself with this much money? Like, what was the kind of
Yeah,
thought process there?
yeah. I mean, like usually money has always been to me like numbers. I never cared too much of that. But in terms of when you get funds like externally and they're not kind of yours, and you basically are in one way treasuring them with your team, that kind of creates responsibility. And it's not always like, I mean, it's great to have responsibility, but it feels quite a lot. But end of the day, especially if someone is working in a law firm or finance or whatnot, and there's in any kind of like uh, job position, the same thing that you basically might be responsible on something very big. The big might be even like confidential information. So uh, I think we all get used to that at certain level, and especially like maybe in London, big things happen there in finance law. So, uh, but I would say, yeah, I was a bit concerned.
And so obviously, like you were effectively doing you were doing a DeFi platform 3 years before it's kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say it's taken off this year, but it's certainly there's been something has changed. What
Yeah,
what what do you think has changed? Is it just slow gathering of momentum? Has there been a catalyst? What's really been the difference there?
yeah, I think the ecosystem has grown. Like when we started, we we practically created the first lending protocol, the blockchain-based lending protocol. Which happened to be on Ethereum because it's the only one with smart contracts and awesome community.
Of
So
course.
what was interesting is that once the ecosystem started to grow, like Kyber came with the liquidity, and space went even bigger with liquidity pools, Uniswap, stable coins. You actually could do a lot of things now. Like it's just not basically kind of depositing assets and borrowing. You could actually do bunch of things. And what's important, like you could develop products and services on top of this ecosystem. So the whatever you're seeing like traditional finance, that sucks. Like you could actually make it better. Like the ecosystem was small, it still is. It's like 2 billion at the moment, so it's nothing compared to like traditional finance. But I feel that now that people are building from left and right, you actually start to feel that it's becoming an economy on its own. And I think that's the difference, like back then and now. So like if you're a DeFi user, there's so many things you can do, and back in then you didn't have that much that you could actually do. So there's a like huge difference there.
Yeah. And what do you think? What has to be if the next step broadly is DeFi hitting the real world or being used in traditional finance? What are the stumbling blocks here before crypto based DeFi stuff is going to be used in traditional finance?
Yeah, I think that it really like going from fiat to let's say stable coins and to DeFi. That's like the gateways are the very first thing. Like it should be easy that you can go from your debit card, and you could go easier to easiest way into DeFi. And of course, like second thing, I would say that you should somehow get that DeFi liquidity into traditional finance. So we're working the both ways. Like when you deposit into our protocol, let's say DAI or USDC, which are stable coins, you basically get in return interest-bearing stable coins, which is basically A tokens, AUSDC or A DAI and whatnot. And what's cool about that is that it algorithmically grows in your wallet address as a balance. So you basically have, in fact, a interest-bearing global savings account, and that basically mitigates against the USD inflation and has automated treasury management. So for a normal human being, what that means that you're holding this asset and it grows in value. That's practically a savings account. Now, to access that savings account, you might have, let's say, dollars or pounds and so forth in your bank account. So how to make that jump into those currencies to another? And it's not that easy to say that there's cryptocurrency exchanges and you could do that. It's still there's still too much friction in between in this process. And of course, like second thing, if you think about like economy as a whole, currently, like the DeFi is more about like influx of capital. So capital is going in, but then you have a lot of capital and value sitting in the smart contracts. And what's interesting is actually to take some of that value and put back into traditional finance, for example, into fintech. So one of the things cool things that we announced yesterday was credit delegation. So anyone that is depositing stablecoins into the protocol can actually delegate their credit to a third party. For example, you might be a depositor and you make a contractual agreement. And this is where the kind of like legal engineering or legal design is coming in, besides the technical engineering. And of course, there's always the economical engineering. So what happens is that you could delegate your credit to a traditional money lender. So we could imagine a situation where we have a fund that's depositing funds into DeFi and delegating their credit line to money lender or a fintech company. Could be, for example, Funding Circle, or who takes those sources, that liquidity from DeFi, and uses it without a collateral, and basically deploys that those assets, that capital, basically to their end user consumers. And what you're doing factually is that people are actually walking down the street, and some of the liquidity that they're using comes from DeFi. So I think those things will need to improve.
Very nice. Two more questions for me, then we'll hand over. So we've got 10 questions already, so keen to get the students talking. But what do you think is missing in the DeFi space right now, as it is? Not with anything kind of traditionally financial in mind, but what's missing right now in the ecosystem?
Well, I think diversity, like diversity in the sense that like most of the stable coins are nominated in USD, which kind of sucks because I personally I live between UK and Finland, so I want a stable coin that is either pounds or euros, or like I want both, and that doesn't exist at the moment.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like painful to earn, let's say, to let's say 6%, and let's say if there is currency risk in between USD and pounds, I might lose that gain. So that's something. But one thing is actually even more important than the actual like product, because this can be built, right?
Yeah.
It's that we have more talent in the space, which basically doesn't mean like software engineers. That's very important. Like if there is some field that you guys are looking upon, DeFi is one of the places to be. I mean, because we're basically reinventing finance in the way that it didn't exist before, and to actually make that change, you basically need people that are actually willing to keep innovating to that direction. Because the worst case scenario is that we are creating the very similar thing that we already exists, and we go back to the traditional boring finance. And so that's important. And it doesn't mean like software developers per se, but also more lawyers, economists, people with degrees in political science to kind of improve the governance systems. Any kind of talent is really required in the space. And I think it's just there's so much potential and so many things to build, and there's so many opportunities. And I think that's one of the interesting places to be right now.
Yeah, fantastic. And what, if I may ask, what's next for AAVE? Not just in the short term, but long term. Where do you see AAVE going?
Yeah, I think what we're doing is kind of like we're definitely working on the protocol and expanding the features and also the market sizes. We recently created a new money market where you can use Uniswap liquidity provider shares. So if you provide liquidity into Uniswap, which is a automated market maker, without going too much into details. So if you have locked value somewhere else than AAVE, you could collateralize that value and borrow against stable coins. But also we're creating multiple of this kind of like money markets. But as a bigger picture, what we want to do is we want to connect the DeFi into traditional finance and kind of like take that capital, very much what I was talking about, but also kind of like onboard more people into as consumers or businesses to deposit. So eventually we're just all about innovating, creating new products on decentralized finance, and that's like the main thing in our mind now.
Sure. Awesome. Well, I will maybe pop in some questions in a bit, but let's go to the students. So a reminder, guys, you have the Q&A function available to you bottom up of your screen. So pop a question in there. You can vote. If anyone would like to ask questions live, please, there is a raise your hand feature. You raise your hand and we can give you access to speak. So if you do want to ask a question live, please do that. But let's go to the first question we have here. How did you initially get the team together, and are you a programmer?
Yeah, I have some programming background, but I would not say that I will be an experienced programmer. Most of the team is now in the product development. So there's 17 persons working at AAVE. And I would say more than half is in the product development, software engineers, designers, and so forth, and risk team as well. So in general, yeah. So I would say like I have to have technical understanding. I have to understand like what's the architecture and being able to participate in that. But you definitely don't need to be a complete programmer to launch something on DeFi, or even like a financial have an economic background. I think if you understand logic and how to govern that logic, that gets you quite far.
And just to kind of follow up on the first part of that question, the initial team. So how did you get the initial team together? Were they friends?
Yeah. That I almost did. So basically, I just asked different communities. I asked Reddit that, hey, I got this interesting project. You guys want to join? I asked in Facebook as well, in different Ethereum-based groups. And what happened actually is that people joined, and we still have team members that are from that very first moment that I shared my project in wider scale. For example, our CEO Jordan is from the early days. Our designers from the early days. A bunch of people are from those days. So that's that. I mean, communities are the best places to find like-minded team members.
Awesome. Well, let's go to a live question. So Nick is here. Damir, could you bump Nick up or allow him to speak? That's to Damir. Bump him up. Can he speak? Nick, can you speak? Nick is here. Very goodly. Nick is has been in all of our hackathons and currently in our club pre-acceleration at the moment, building a video platform. Used to studies at Peking and used to be based out of Oxford. So Nick, far away.
Hey. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Cool. So yeah, since you have a background with legal and law, and you're working in with AAVE, I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about what you expect for the future of regulation considering DeFi. I think before the whole COVID mess, especially with the US, governments were kind of talking about that there needs to be more regulation on DeFi. So I was curious what you think the future will have for that.
Yeah, it's a good question. Like the regulation is something that hasn't been like that's like there's so much gray area at the moment, and I would have expected that like regulation kicks in quite quicker in the DeFi space, but that hasn't happened. There has been like discussions this year as DeFi has grown a bit, but still it's quite a small amount of context. And I think the space requires regulation in the sense that different kinds of like ways how products are being built, governed, and so forth. But also kind of been thinking like why there isn't that much regulation. One of the things is that about DeFi is that there's certain elements that needs to be fulfilled. Something to be DeFi, like the non-custodial element, some of the transparency, for example, could be one important argument. And the DeFi community itself understands that those are important and understands why, let's say, smart contract audits are important and so forth. So I think like there's very good safeguard systems within the community. So that might be like one reason. So if anyone is familiar like with laws, or I mean regulation, is that some industries are governed by soft law. So when things are working by themselves well, and communities or industries are able to govern themselves and their practices, usually regulators don't have the necessity to actually safeguard. Now, in terms of finance and financial products, it's kind of different because uh, basically financial decisions are going after yield. And what's the problem with retail is that it's very difficult to distinguish the risk reward ratios and understand like what kind of risk they're taking. But so far it hasn't been that big an issue, but I would see this thing growing, as especially this year that the space has been very hot, that basically all kinds of malicious actors are pursuing retail uh, assets, and that might lead to an issue. So I would say like something will increase in terms of regulation wise.
Awesome, thank you, Nick. We'll go back to the written questions for now, and then head over to Amin. So let's go first, top of the written question. Do you think the current large banks will get on board with DeFi? DeFi has the potential to shrink their value and threaten their current business models. So do you think the large banks should be quaking in their boots at DeFi, or should be getting on board with it?
Yeah, I think like I've seen previous like different kinds of experiments where like the JP Morgan's JPM coin and those kind of experimentations, like some of them are quite silly. Like the JPM coin was a bit silly in my opinion. Like it's kind of like a bit useless thing, but it's experimentation. Same of course, like some of the banks has done like settlement of syndicated loans on Ethereum. So they record some data and most likely on permission chain, which is not the public Ethereum blockchain. And it feels like very silly experimentations, and they are, but they have actually a bigger meaning there, because it means that this kind of like the market participants in the traditional finance, they're basically testing out the waters, and they're getting their comfort and confidence levels up. And there's some requirements that they can't actually perform. For example, if there isn't enough privacy, it's very difficult then to operate. And of course, like the idea of DeFi is that you don't basically need the privacy because you have auditability and the transparency. But we should see that as a default, and kind of that privacy should be added where it's needed. So I think they're definitely doing experimentations, and end of the day, like if DeFi becomes a settlement network which is superior to the current settlement networks that we have, naturally that innovation should take over.
Awesome. Let's go to the next written question. Why are people taking out loans, I presume on AAVE, since I have to put in more collateral than I can borrow? Is it only for shorting?
So people usually have, let's say you might have different kinds of assets that are you're in long position. For example, you have a bunch of ETH, yeah, and you might not want to sell that. So what you could do is you can borrow stable coins instead, and then you have and convert to real fiat currencies, and then you basically have working capital. So that's one of the things that you can unlock liquidity. And the other part of it is that you can actually deposit either ETH or stable coins and borrow different kinds of assets and use either to provide somewhere else to supply liquidity, or you basically can short. And of course, there's a bunch of other things that you can build on top where you actually need the DeFi liquidity. And one of the functions that we have, the credit delegation, the idea is that you actually don't need a collateral because someone else provides the collateral, and you make a legal agreement with that person, and then you can borrow without, and that's also an option.
Awesome. We'll do one more written, then we'll go to Amin. How many users do you think there are in DeFi? So I assume that the meat of the question is how many real users that are actually using it, and yeah, they're not just people kind of cycling their funds over and over again.
I think that's a good question. Like I remember a year ago, I think DeFi had like 10,000 users, and at some point 30,000 now. My fair guess would be maybe 50,000. so that's not that much. I mean, might be even less. The space is very small, but it seems that it is growing really, really fast. I mean, we launched our protocol in January from zero, and now we have market size of 180 something million. That just highlights like how things can go quickly and very, very rapidly up.
Awesome. Let's go to Amin. Damir, can you bump Amin up so he can ask his question? Amin is bumped up. So Amin again, one of our serial hackers, and done very well for himself. Won a lot of money, quite frankly, in our hackathons, which is always good to see. Amin, over to you.
All right, so my question is a couple of questions back. You mentioned about, I think, the JP Morgan coin may be somewhat useless. What are your thoughts on how a project can impart intrinsic value to a coin or token rather than it being just a gimmick for fundraising or the like, or just being there so that you have a token asset, but making it actually useful and necessary.
Yeah. By the way, congratulations for doing a series of participating in hackathons. That's strength all the way. So I think that's a good point. I mean, I think we're past on the idea of issuing basically tokens that doesn't have any kind of meaning. I think what's the current narrative is that in DeFi space that you're issuing a token that gives governance right over a protocol. So it gives power to basically change parameters or upgradability of the code. And since these protocols have a lot of funds, so let's say in case of AAVE, that amount of basic locked value that we have in the protocol, that's basically AUM, asset under management. And that basically means that it should be for the token holders to decide. But also, besides that, like we could kind of ask a question like, is it sufficient that you basically have a governance token? Should there be actually some kind of like monetary policies or any kind of policies involved in the token economics? I mean, because they're called token economics, not because you govern, but there's some kind of economical function that is behind it. And one of the things that we are doing now with AAVE, we're basically releasing so-called AAVEnomics that basically state, besides the governing the protocol and the assets there in general, what kind of utility you have for the token. And how we see DeFi is that the liquidity is basically the network effect in Web3. And we see that one way is to secure that liquidity that you provide. In one place, you reward it as well, but also you need to somehow secure it. And basically, we're using a staking mechanism where you stake the LEND token into a staking contract. And basically, if there is so-called shortfall event that the protocol is deficit in some way, basically that stake gets slashed and basically those tokens will be sold for stable coins, and there's a built-in backstop module that actually is buying those stable coins if it doesn't reach a market price. So you actually provide utility in a way that the token holders are bearing the risk to secure the protocol for the liquidity providers, and also liquidity providers are getting rewards for providing liquidity. And this is just applicable to what we are doing. Like if someone is creating a different kinds of protocol, so let's say automated money market or DEX aggregator or something completely different, insurance scheme, other type, that what we're doing might not apply for them.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Amin. Let's go back to the written questions. So that more of a hiring question, which makes sense because they're students. What do you look for when employing new staff? Is it more of a CommSci background or a financial background?
I think generally problem solving skills. So I think that's the most important thing. In terms of like open positions, we're looking quite heavily now software engineers, also economic backgrounds, and also at the moment persons with legal background for compliance and also for legal. So that's something very interesting. I would not be too shy about about the experience. It really depends on the person and the problem solving skills. And I mean, if there is enough kind of like a will to work in this industry and kind of like take it further, I definitely recommend to apply to AAVE. I mean, you never know, but what we definitely appreciate is problem solving skills and talent that you're interested in learning things and not giving up. So there's like many things that you need to handle at the same time, because one of the things is that the DeFi space changes all the time. So it's important to follow what's happening. So if you are 1 week in the space without following anything, the space might change quite a lot. I mean, it might look quite different.
Awesome. Good question and answer. Next one, how can crypto lending grow when there is no identity in crypto?
Yeah, so usually you build identity and that kind of things on top. So let's say with the credit delegation, what's interesting is that two parties that know each other, let's say JP Morgan, Goldman, if JPM deposits into the other protocol, they can delegate their credit to Goldman, and they pretty much trust each other in the sense that they also know each other and know their reputation. But you can also build services on top where you match potential candidate that could basically repay the loans. So it's a question more about kind of who you will give credit and underwriting. And it's not a crypto related thing. I think it's general, like related to lending business. Who can you lend out and who you should not to.
Awesome. Let's go to another live question. Let's go to Chris, who won our SAP challenge in the last hackathon and is a graduate of Cambridge. So Chris, let's fire over to you.
Hi. Thank you.
Hey.
Hi. My question is, you mentioned about DeFi and based on Ethereum, it's all open. So in the business world or in banking, majority of transactions are private. For example, I can't imagine a company, a large company wants to, have an M&A activities, raising fund, and they probably wouldn't want to use DeFi because all the public and potentially other people or companies can trace who they are. So what do you think, and also, the finance sector mainly dominated by, large companies. These companies obviously doesn't want their transaction exposed on public spaces. How do you see this problem can be solved?
I think that's a very good topic, because if you think about like the Ethereum as such, like the auditability and transparency like brings the kind of like the trust over the protocol that you basically don't, well, trustless, you don't need to trust because you can see everything, right? So like that's as a default function, that's very beautiful. Like that's one of the things what I like, kind of like I think like maybe in the Nordics we're very and also this is the same applies in UK and Europe in general, like transparency is valued quite a lot. But end of the day, if you're business participant, you really don't want to signal everything that you're doing for multiple reasons. And what's interesting about the Ethereum or blockchain in general, like you could build privacy functions on top. So let's say that you need to have privacy, you can build with zero knowledge proofs, for example. So those things are definitely something that could be done. We're working together with another London-based project called Aztec Protocol. So they are focusing on privacy. And what's interesting in their kind of like model is that we're working together with them to, as we have the A tokens, which are interest-bearing tokens, we are looking to basically create this kind of like a ZK A DAI, so that basically those assets are private and you can't see like how much is in certain balance. So I think you can build privacy, but there's so much things to do, and I think that's something that is coming up slowly, but very firmly, because the cryptography exists already. So that's there. It's just about applying it.
Which company is it that you mentioned about the company you work?
Yeah, it's called Aztec. Let me.
Aztec.
Yeah, I will write it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
London based as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So also in Shoreditch. So.
Okay. Cheers.
And also, I think the founder went to Cambridge. So Tom.
Yeah. I mean, they are very, they're doing very fascinating work. I don't know if they're hiring or not, but also very interesting project as well.
Yeah. Awesome, Chris. Thank you very much for that question.
You.
I'm actually going to ask your next question because you've written on Q&A. What do you think about flash loans? Are they the future? Do they scare you?
Well, they don't scare me in the sense that, I mean, like, we provide flash loan natively in the protocol, but I think just if you're building something on top of Ethereum, you just need to ensure that kind of like your system is resilient to flash loans, especially when it comes to oracles and such. So flash loans aren't new thing. Like, it just allows like nerds to have whale-like liquidity. So instead of like whales doing this kind of like transactions, you suddenly have anyone with basically programming skills that they can have this massive amount of liquidity. And I don't think I see them as an opportunity. Like we have on a daily basis maybe few hundreds of thousands of volume in flash loans, and they're mainly used for good stuff.
Awesome. So keep the questions coming, guys. We'll try and get through all the ones on written. If anyone wants to ask any more questions live, just raise your hand and we'll get to them. So next question, a little bit sensitive. What is your view on smart contract risk? Do you think AAVE will ever get hacked?
Well, you know what? Like, smart contract risk is always there. And in terms of like, there is an equation that is very difficult because we as developers and makers, like we have limited time to develop stuff, and basically exploiters, attackers have unlimited time to actually to basically attack. And what's the kind of common knowledge in the security industry is that it's not about like if, it's more about when. And that is why it's important that we always audit our code, and we do basically mathematical formal verification of the code, running through a software and looking what kind of outputs it might produce and eliminating the negative ones. And also we're using our token economics to secure the deposits. So we're taking a lot of functions and measures to mitigate that risk to incur.
Awesome. Let's go to the next question. What are the difficulties and challenges in building decentralized lending platforms that AAVE have met so far? So what have been the challenges? Have they been legal, technical, KYC problems? What are the challenges you've kind of faced over the last few years?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is that the space changes very, very rapidly. So kind of like we want to ship very quickly code out and products out, but the problem is that we have to develop very slowly because of the fact that we're creating financial products, and there's so much due diligence involved in that process before production ready code goes to auditors, and then basically and also formal verification, and then it goes to actual production. So we want to be faster, but those elements are kind of slowing down, and it's difficult to move because the narrative changes more frequently than anyone can ship. So that's, I think, the challenge. And of course, like the getting enough talent is also the thing, because like there is sort of talent coming into the space, but also there is learning curves to be satisfied before that. So that's one, like it really takes time before we can train someone to become a kind of like a superstar. So
brilliant. Next question: do you think some more traditional financial players will enter crypto lending, such as perhaps Revolut?
Yeah, I think they're doing a certain extent that they they have cryptocurrency inventory. I don't know if they have it anymore, but or how they are structuring it. So definitely they're lending it out to places where they get yield. But in terms of more directly, I think I think at some point like stable coins, at least even cryptocurrencies like volatile assets such as BTC ETH, it makes sense to put the funds to work. So I think they will.
We've answered the next question on flash loans. We won't revisit that. So let's go to the next one. Why did you rebrand away from ETHLend? And what was the thoughts behind AAVE as the new name?
Yeah, so ETHLend was kind of like a meme project. So we started like it's basically short of from Ethereum lending, and the idea was just to launch this proof of concept and forget the project, and that didn't happen. So we were basically here, and we wanted to brand because we want to do more than Ethereum and lending, and also kind of like we tried to figure out like what kind of brand name we could come up with. And we noticed that usually in financial products, names are very conservative because they're taking custody of your assets. So they want to form this kind of like illusion of trust. And what's interesting is that we don't have that kind of element because what we have in DeFi is that we basically don't need that kind of trust because we have the smart contract code that executes in a certain way and you can't change that. So we decided to basically name AAVE, which means ghost in Finnish. And I'm personally in Finland, and we have this kind of like a ghost logo, so it's very cute. And and basically, I think it has worked very well for us. And also, there's like double A, so if we're in some directory,
very smart,
quite good exposure.
Nice. I like it. We've done the next question, which was on hiring. So let's go to the one from Kyle. How would you raise now if you were doing it again? Would you still do an ICO?
Well, I would maybe do a token distribution event, but I would not call it ICO. I would probably do a bit differently. The cool thing about tokens is that they're basically like from 0 to 100 things. So let's say usually like funding goes in rounds. You have like the pre-seed, seed, A, B, C, D, whatever. And what's interesting about like tokens is that they could just launch a token, and the investors that are bearing the most of the risk, they basically can come earlier. They have the biggest upside and downside. And once you reach more and more market capitalization, basically more risk appetite or less risk appetite, like depending on the direction, investors will come. And I could see like DeFi being one of those things where we'll see like billion market caps quite easily, but also like because of this space is global and anyone can partake to that market, it might even go higher than that. So we might see like trillion market caps in DeFi at some points, maybe years to come, who knows.
Awesome. Why did AAVE not continue with its peer-to-peer strategy instead of pool-based?
Well, the thing is that in peer-to-peer, you kind of like have the chicken and egg problem. So someone needs to come and someone needs to basically match. You need to match the orders. So you basically need the makers and fakers. In pooled model, you can just basically park liquidity and it's ready for grabs. And if you model and engineer the interest rate formulas in a way that they're very competitive, you might not even need this kind of like peer-to-peer matching where you lock users to some time period. So our sweet spot in our interest rate curve is like utilization of almost like 90% of the assets, because like only 10% usually moves like as withdrawals and deposits. So you don't need that much more than that space that people can actually come to the protocol and leave without affecting the rates. So it's very competitive model. It's very difficult to compete with peer-to-peer order matching. And I think same problem was for TransferWise as well. Like they had first like the order matching, but then they organized professional liquidity providers and solved that issue as well. So yeah.
Awesome. What do you think of DAOs? Do you think they could be better at governing decentralized protocols than a foundation?
Yeah, I think so. DAOs are very nice experiment. They're also kind of like you can create different kinds of versions of DAOs. I think I see DAOs like cool cooperatives. So, or depending on how you structure, those are like very interesting stuff. And well, actually, Aave is now transforming from what it is into a DAO. Basically, the difference is that token holders are governing, but eventually, like DAO could be membership based and whatnot.
Awesome. Interesting question here. How did you feel during the 2018 crash? Did you think about quitting?
2018, no, I didn't care that much about the crash, because I can say like very honestly that the first time I went into the crypto and blockchain scene, I basically I never took any funds out. I always like I think I have more influx capital into this space than out, and basically I think the reason is that I see like DeFi and Ethereum as an economy, and some on building things, so I haven't like much cared about that. Yeah.
Awesome. What is the next big thing in DeFi? We've kind of touched on that before, but let's go at it again. What's the next big thing in the space?
Yeah, we're very bullish basically on the now kind of the under collateralized lending space. That's pretty interesting, but also kind of different kinds of credit derivatives and derivatives in general. Risk transfer is very interesting. So there's a bunch of stuff that you could do. But once we are get rid of this, like the boring stuff of reinventing finance, like the more important thing comes when we are using DeFi in other parts of Ethereum spaces that doesn't exist yet that well. For example, e-commerce and so forth. So that's those things are pretty big, I think.
Awesome. What is your favorite hackathon project? Doesn't have to be Aave based.
Let me think about it. I mean, there's so many. I love the one. I can't remember the name. Was it like Magic Bet or something? So
Yeah.
basically, it was during the Hack Money Hackathon. So what happened there is that basically you could place prediction. So let's say, well, kind of like you can gamble basically. So it was pretty funny because like you could participate in let's say kind of like you can put a wager on let's say outcome of election, and you stake some funds, and those staked funds goes to Aave, and they're earning interest, and whoever is right, or the group of people who are right on the outcome basically gets the interest rate from that. So that was pretty cool.
I remember that project very well. It was very nice. Okay, let's go to the next one. Do you plan to introduce changes to the Lend token, add a governance element?
Yeah, that's the Aavonomics I mentioned. So basically, there's going to be a paper out quite soon in a couple of weeks that describes what we're going to do.
Awesome. A couple more questions. Let's go to the next one. So what is your view of current valuations of governance tokens?
Yeah, I think they have they have as much value as like basically the community gives them. So if you value what's important for what the function of the protocol is, I think that's the valuation.
Very political answer. So one of the last ones here. Do you think DeFi will work on other platforms, other blockchains?
Yeah, I do. I believe like I think technology should be like agnostic on that. So I mean, DeFi and agnostic on technology, definitely. It's interesting to see like what's going to happen with stuff like Polkadot and so forth. I think it will.
Awesome. So a couple more from me just to finish. So the first one is, we obviously have a lot of hackers who are looking to start companies and go down that route. What would you advise? Would you advise them to do a kind of traditional company structure, or go for this kind of protocol tokenized approach?
Yeah, I would say like first try to test the waters and see how your idea works. And if you get traction, then I think it's good to think about what to do, and whether you need a company or what's the thing. If you have issues on thinking or solving, or you have increased demand, you can always contact me and I can try to help you out. But I think it's all about trying out like if your product has product market or protocol market fit, and after that evaluating what you should do.
Yeah. And last one, again, a general one. What is your advice to kind of would-be hackers, would-be company starters? You obviously did it. You took the big leap. What's your kind of best advice for them on what to do next if they're thinking about building a company or protocol?
Yeah, I think the important stuff is to taking it a bit slow. So there is no rush. Like even if things are moving fast, it's better to design things very well than then fix with kind of like patches in later stage. So I would focus a lot on the product development and the idea itself, and I think the more work you put there, the less you have to patch things on the later stage.
Awesome. Well, look, thank you. So thank you so much for your time, for your insight. I know the students greatly appreciate it, and we greatly appreciate it as well. So thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts and answering all the questions. We greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for having me here, Anthony.
Our pleasure.
Everyone luck.
Yeah, for the students, for guys who are in the hackathon, keep building, work on AAVE, build cool stuff. For those who are not in the hackathon, we hope you heed all the advice and do great things in the future. But again, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. We will share the video for this on YouTube and on Medium. I'll write a little transcript up. And yeah, thank you all very much, and enjoy your evenings wherever you are.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much.